She walked home on a Friday afternoon and vanished into a house she thought she understood. Gina DeJesus, 2004. The Cleveland Kidnappings. The Vanishing Walk Home. On an ordinary April afternoon, 14-year-old Gina DeJesus began the short walk home she had taken so many times before. The streets were familiar, safe, unchanged, but a familiar van slowed beside her and a trusted voice called her name. In a single moment, the ordinary shattered. While her family launched a desperate search, Gina was hidden inside a house no one suspected. And for nearly a decade, her story would echo behind a door the city never thought to open. It was a cool Friday afternoon in early April, the kind of day that lingered between winter's last breath and the first promise of spring. When the final bell rang at Wilbur Wright Middle School, the halls burst into the familiar end-of-week rhythm, lockers slamming shut, backpacks being swung over shoulders, and the quick chatter of students ready for the weekend. 14-year-old Gina DeJesus stepped into the flow of sound and motion, her smile small but bright, her mind already drifting toward home. She wasn't in a hurry. She never was. The walk back through Detroit's Shoreway was part of her routine, a short stretch of sidewalks she'd traveled so many times she could have traced them with her eyes closed. Beside her was her closest friend, Arlene Castro. The girls had grown up just streets apart, their families intertwined through years of neighborhood familiarity. They laughed as they exited the school doors, trading small stories, complaining about homework, planning weekend possibilities. They were, in every sense, two ordinary girls finishing an ordinary school day. But ordinary days have a way of breaking without warning. At the corner, Arlene paused and pulled out her phone. She wanted to walk Gina home, but she knew she needed permission first. She dialed her mother, hoping for a yes, hoping for just a little more time together. Gina waited beside her, rocking gently on the edges of her shoes, relaxed and unaware of the thin thread of fate stretching between them. Arlene's mother said no. The answer was quick, firm, and final. She had to come straight home. The call ended. The girls exchanged a small, disappointed smile, the kind only best friends can share when plans quietly dissolve. And so, at that unremarkable corner, their paths split. Gina began the familiar walk alone. A short route, a safe route, a route she had taken 100 times, but she would never make it home. Gina had only walked a few blocks when a slowing engine softened the air beside her. A worn, familiar van eased toward the curb, the same one she had seen countless times outside Arlene's house. Behind the wheel sat Ariel Castro, Arlene's father, a face she had grown up trusting without even realizing it. Castro wasn't a stranger lurking in the neighborhood, he was part of the neighborhood. He played music at local gatherings, waved to parents, and carried himself like a man who blended into the fabric of everyday life. When he leaned toward the open window and called Gina's name, there was nothing unusual about it. His tone was warm, casual, almost friendly, the kind of voice that made a young girl feel safe. Castro asked if she had seen Arlene. The question sounded simple, harmless, like a small thread of daily concern from a busy parent. Gina said no. Castro nodded thoughtfully, performing worry with quiet precision, then offered her a ride home. And why not? This was her best friend's father, a man her family knew, a man who had never been anything but kind in her presence. At 14, trust often comes pre-packaged, handed down by the adults around you. If they trusted him, why shouldn't she? So Gina stepped closer, opened the passenger door, and climbed inside. It was such an ordinary movement, a slight bend of the knee, a shift of weight, a click of the door closing, that nothing about it felt final. Yet the moment the latch sealed the frame, her world had already tilted, quietly, almost invisibly. Castro pulled away from the curb, the van merging smoothly back into traffic. To anyone watching, it was just a man giving a neighborhood girl a ride home. Nothing alarming, nothing worth a second glance. But inside that van, the air thickened with a truth Gina couldn't yet sense. The hum of the engine, steady and calm, carried her away from the safe orbit of childhood and into a darkness she had no way to foresee. The short ride she believed she was taking, the simple, familiar path toward home, was already gone. And Gina, unaware, sat quietly in the passenger seat, trusting the wrong man at the wrong moment on a day that would never lead her back to where she belonged. One walk home, one familiar voice, and a girl who never arrived. Castro drove as if nothing in the world were out of place. The van moved steadily through the familiar streets of Cleveland, past corner stores and worn brick houses, past the routes Gina had walked her entire life. From the passenger seat, she watched the world slip by in fragments. A passing bus, a barking dog behind a fence, the soft gold of the afternoon sun settling over Lorraine Avenue. Everything looked exactly as it always did, and that sameness wrapped her in a false sense of safety. She didn't notice that Castro was taking a slightly different turn than the one that led to her house. She didn't question the detour. He was Arlene's father. Fathers sometimes had errands or reasons or explanations young girls didn't think to challenge. When the van finally slowed again, they weren't in front of her home at all. They were in front of his. The small, ordinary-looking white house didn't strike her as strange. Castro mentioned something quickly, something about checking on Arlene or needing to grab something from inside. His tone was calm, practiced, almost bored. Gina felt no alarm, no hesitation. She unbuckled her seatbelt and followed him up the short path to the front door, unaware that she was walking toward a threshold hundreds of others had passed without ever knowing what lay behind it. Castro opened the door and stepped inside first, gesturing for her to enter. The moment Gina crossed the threshold, the air shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The house was dimmer than she expected, too quiet with an undercurrent of something she couldn't name. Still, she walked in. She trusted him. She believed she would be out again in minutes. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, not loud enough to frighten her, but final enough that if she had truly listened, she might have heard the first echo of what was coming. Inside, Castro's tone changed, not suddenly, not violently, but with a chilling casualness that made the room feel colder. He told her Arlene wasn't there after all. He said it as though it didn't matter, as though the lie he had used to lure her in were a minor detail, easily brushed away. When Gina turned toward him, confused, something in his expression had shifted. The kindness was gone, replaced by a flat, unreadable stare. In that split second, the ordinary world she had known, school hallways, weekend plans, shared secrets with friends, seemed to collapse inward. Before she could make sense of the unease rising in her chest, the reality revealed itself with swift, silent clarity. She was not going home. She was not leaving this house. The door she had walked through so easily a moment ago had become a barrier, and the man she had trusted was no longer a protector, but a threat waiting to unfold. For Gina, the threshold that separated the outside world from Castro's house was more than a doorway. It was a line she would spend nearly a decade trying to come back across, a line that would divide the life she had known from the darkness she was about to enter. When Gina failed to walk through the front door at her usual time, her family didn't panic at first. 14-year-olds could be unpredictable, stopping to talk to friends, lingering at the corner store, wandering home a little slower on a Friday afternoon. But as the minutes stretched into an hour and the early evening light began to thin across the neighborhood, a quiet unease settled over the DeJesus home. Gina was responsible, steady, the kind of girl who called if she was running late. Her absence felt wrong in a way that tugged at her mother's instincts with increasing urgency. By sunset, Those instincts sharpened into something colder. Calls were made to her friends. Had anyone seen her after school? Was she walking with someone? The same answer came back each time. She had left with Arlene, but they had split ways early. No one had seen her after that. Gina's family retraced the route she always took, walking the sidewalks she knew by heart. They called her name into the dimming air, their voices echoing down streets that should have felt safe. Neighbors stepped out onto porches, offering worried glances, a flashlight, a sense of shared dread. The route was short, familiar, contained. There were so few places she could have gone. And yet Gina was not there. When the police were contacted, the response was gentle but dismissive, a suggestion that she might have chosen to stay out longer, or wandered off with a friend, or found a distraction teenagers often found. But Gina's mother knew better. Mothers always know. Her voice trembled with something deeper than worry. She insisted this wasn't normal, insisted something was wrong. Still, the system moved slowly, bound by procedures that rarely matched the urgency felt by those who loved the missing. As night settled fully over Cleveland, the DeJesus family refused to wait. They began their own search, knocking on doors, checking alleys, scanning the dim glow of storefront windows, walking the same streets again and again, as though repetition might bend reality into something hopeful. Friends joined, cousins joined, each new pair of feet hitting the pavement, adding to the rhythm of a family unwilling to let fear swallow them. Hope drove them forward, fragile but persistent, a small light flickering against a growing void. Inside Castro's house, Gina was already lost to them. Outside, her family did not yet know how far that loss would reach or how long it would stretch. All they knew was that she had vanished somewhere between school and home, a distance so short, so ordinary, that it made the silence that followed feel unbearable. That night was the beginning of a search that would not fade quickly. It was the first step in a journey that would test faith, fracture certainty, and pull an entire community into a storm they never saw coming. Hope was still present in those first hours, trembling but alive. And it would be that hope, fragile and stubborn, that kept Gina's name from ever disappearing into the dark. In the days that followed, the DeJesus home transformed from a quiet family space into the beating heart of a growing movement. What began as a frightened search on a single Friday night expanded into a community effort that stretched across Cleveland. Gina's mother printed missing posters with trembling hands, smoothing each one as though the act itself could bring her daughter closer. Neighbors stapled them to telephone poles, storefronts, community boards, any surface that might catch someone's eye. Her face, once seen only in family photos and school albums, was suddenly everywhere. Taped to gas station windows, posted outside churches, carried by volunteers who refused to let her name fade into background noise. Day after day, search parties formed and reformed, combing parks, alleys, abandoned lots, following every whisper of a lead no matter how thin. The effort wasn't organized by institutions or officials. It was fueled by a mother's grief, a father's determination, and a community's unwillingness to let a young girl simply vanish without a trace. With time, the story grew beyond their neighborhood. Local news channels began covering the disappearance, cameras crowding around the DeJesus home as reporters asked the same painful questions the family had begun asking themselves. Gina's parents stood before microphones with voices heavy but unwavering, pleading for information, urging anyone who had seen anything at all, to come forward. Candlelight vigils lit the streets, hundreds gathering with flickering flames and prayers that rose into the cold night air. They marched together, chanted her name and carried signs demanding attention from authorities who were still slow to act. Their hesitation, another wound the family was forced to bear. And yet, despite frustration, despite exhaustion, the DeJesus family pressed on. They organized fundraisers, formed search committees, and spoke at schools and churches. They refused to let Gina become just another missing child whose photo curled and faded on a bulletin board. As weeks became months, the search evolved into something more enduring, a ritual of persistence, a refusal to surrender to silence. Every anniversary of her disappearance brought renewed marches, news interviews, and rallies. Her parents walked miles across the city, wearing shirts embroidered with their daughter's face, holding on to hope with a strength that astonished those who watched them. They believed, fiercely and visibly, that Gina was alive. Their commitment was unwavering, loud, relentless, and in that determination, a powerful truth emerged. Even when official efforts wavered, even when leads dried up, even when the world moved on, her family did not. They built a wall of love and refusal around her memory, a wall strong enough that somehow it kept her story alive for years. For nearly 10 years, Gina's name echoed through Cleveland, carried by marches, vigils, and a family that refused to let her story fade. Inside the house on Seymour Avenue, she held on to hope in the smallest ways, waiting for a door that never opened. But a shift was coming, one that would change everything for the 3 young women trapped inside. As we move forward, remember this: every disappearance leaves a trail of questions. Which moment stayed with you tonight? Share your thoughts below and step with me into the next chapter of this story. Next on True Echoes. But the search never stopped. Behind closed doors, time was already beginning to disappear. Next episode, Gina DeJesus, Inside the Silence. The truth coming soon on True Echoes. As you reflect on Gina's journey tonight, tell me, which moment stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts below and join me in the next episode as we step deeper into the house that held 3 young women captive for 10 long years. To be continued. And step into the echoes of truth.